Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. Today, we have a special guest with us. We have the Director of Coaching for United Soccer Coaches, Ian. Good afternoon. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Valerio. Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Today, we're going to have an interesting discussion on how formations can become systems. Ian's going to talk to us about this in a presentation. If you have any questions, we ask that you either put them in the chat section of the Zoom below, or your question and answer button. So there's two buttons you can use: the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Ian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri today. And I run coaching education programs for United Soccer Coaches. We have lots of Canadians come down and take the courses here in the US, which is great. Very good representation from Ontario, particularly, but when we're on the West Coast, a lot of guys come down from British Columbia, etc. So I've been doing this job in full-time coach education, and we run kind of parallel to US Soccer Federation in some respects. For the last 9 years. Prior to that, I coached college in the US for 21 seasons, and I was also state director for youth soccer in Minnesota. And actually, it's quite interesting because the way we run a state association in the US is not dissimilar to some of your bigger clubs in your community. So I did some work with John and Tony LaFerrera at Pickering a few years ago. What I really like about Canada is your clubs, you have less clubs, but they tend to be bigger and more community focused. So my experiences in Canada have always been extremely positive. And then I grew up in Great Britain and went to university in Great Britain, but I came to this country in '87. Because of the way that US soccer is generous to many people, I've had the opportunity to travel internationally and do coach ed at a lot of places. And then, of course, the last year, Valerio, as all your guests would understand and participants, a lot of it's been in the Zoom space. So increasingly, we're more comfortable in this type of interaction.
Sounds good. All right, let's get into your presentation, Ian.
Yep. So I get to share the screen when you give it to me.
Yeah.
While Valerio is just working out some Zoom things, just a couple of notes for the group of you. As a good group of participants, so thank you for being here live. I need to tip my hat to Tony Waiters, obviously very influential in the things of the NSCAC, but Tony was the in charge of goalkeeper education here in my organization prior to my coming on board. So Tony's a huge loss to all of us in the US, North America, Canada, and world soccer. So just a tip of my hat to Tony.
Yeah, it was a big loss. While I'm trying to give you some access, talk a little bit about the upcoming coaching convention that you guys are interested in hosting, because we do have a lot of coaches from our area, and some of them are even on this call today that might be interested in attending in January.
Yeah. Okay. So again, guys, just little promo here. It's actually on the website linked about this meeting that we have an annual convention, and members of your association are parallel members with our association. We do an annual event in January. This year it'll be in Kansas City, or in January of 2022, it'll be in Kansas City. It's a good airport here. It's where I live. It's where my offices are. And we'll have a week long of activity. We'll have 200 educational presentations, All America, an exhibitor show. Usually about 10,000 soccer coaches come through the event. And I think any of you that have been to it before can speak to the fact it's a pretty intensive week of socializing, networking. the education is great, and sort of from 8, 9 a.m. to probably 4 p.m. you're
Sorry about that, guys. I'm just trying to see. There's Ian. You're on mute, Ian. We're having some technical difficulties today.
okay. How are we doing now?
We're good.
All right. So, and you can see my screen, Valerio?
We're good with the screen, yes.
All right. So, Coach, is about 20 minutes here with my PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll open up for discussion questions. When John De Benedictis first called me, I wanted to talk about how formations become systems, which is what I'm going to talk to you about. But I've added some extra content here that talks about club development and creating a club culture and a club identity. But what I think we can probably, if we're all honest with ourselves, we can all say that at some point in our career, when people asked us to explain what our team did, we would say a series of numbers beginning with 1 that added up to 11, and that would be our answer to what our philosophy of soccer was. So I play a 4-4-2, or I play a 4-3-3. And that's great. That's a start. And I think if you watch MLS, Premier League, professional leagues, you can pretty much see that basic formation when they kick off. But then you really can't see it very much for the rest of the 90 minutes, apart from the other kickoffs around halftime and goals. And what it doesn't tell you is how that becomes a system, how it's employed in terms of pressing high, pressing low, funneling to the wide, funneling to the center. Is the triangle in the midfield? I mean, if you say you've got a 4-3-3 and I say I've got a 4-3-3, do you play with 1 deep, 2 high, 2 deep, 1 high? Do you play with the diamond if it's 4 in the midfield? What are the roles of your fullbacks? So if I look at some English football, the fullbacks never go beyond the wide midfielders or the wide attackers. But in other systems, the fullbacks are at the corner flags all the time. So the great thing about this is the formations are just really very, very basic kind of concepts. And I think as coaches, sometimes we get too stuck on those numbers that add up to 11, and we don't talk enough about how we employ that in our context. So for me, what I'd like to share with you today is all about my context or my hypothetical context, and then how you would use that based on the resources and what you have available to you wherever you particularly coach, and whatever influence and impact you can have on your team. There we go, good. So I was not lazy in this presentation, but I took a presentation I first adapted in 2017 and presented at the convention. And at the time, it was particularly important because in the US, we had been mandated to go to a small-sided game format across the ages, and you can see that there. So this was contemporary at the time, but I would argue it's very contemporary now. This was something that we first suggested to clubs, coaches, as a potential. Certainly not the only way to do it, but what we find with a lot of our clubs is they come to me and they say, well, when should we start goalkeeper training? And when do we do this? And when do we do that? So what we did here was we plugged in the big circles are when US soccer said we must introduce these game formats. So at the 5 and 6 year olds or the 8 and unders are playing 4v4. The 9 and 10s, under 9 and 10, 7s, under 11s and 12s, 9v9, and then we go to, in this country, we go to 11v11. So those are fixed things. The club doesn't really get to control those. But they do have to think about when they introduce the other sports science and the other content, if they're providing a full service to their membership, their parent base, their player base. And where this actually is really interesting for what my experience of Canadian clubs is that very often in the Canadian clubs, you might have the kid from 3, 4, 5 through to adulthood. unfortunately, in the US, there's way too much player movement in the youth levels. So I would argue that some of the things I'm going to talk about here actually fit what I consider the good elements of your model, or some of your model, even better. So this was a guideline, right? Futsal training is very big here in the US right now. And so we think futsal training is a great thing for the young kids in the off season. You can see we have some idea about when the physical and psychological towards the end of the spectrum come in. So this is not the right or wrong way. This was just a suggested template, but certainly something to get coaches and clubs thinking about what they could do. The US numbering system, I'm not sure if it's completely compatible with you, but we talk about this a lot because this is something that we find lots of young players now in our country are really comfortable understanding. Now, the number pretty much determines a geographical space on the field, right? So the kids know where to line up if you say go and be a number 2 now. Again, to the point of not enough information, is that number 2 an overlapping player? Are they primarily a defensive player? Is the 10 really a withdrawn midfielder? What is the role of the 6 and the 8? But this numbering formation, I think, is something to actually, I think it really helps create the most basic starting point for for developing your formation and then developing it into a system. You'll see some examples as we go through where we could argue that because of what we interpret a number 9 to be, maybe both players up top are number 9s, they're twin strikers, and you don't really have a number 10. And if that's the case, maybe in your central midfield, you actually play with 2 8s, 2 players that have to go back and forth. You don't play with a holder and a runner. So again, it's not to say you've got to literally account for all 11 numbers, but this is helpful. Just a little caveat. I got beaten up on Twitter about this because in Holland and Belgium, it goes 2, 3, 4, 5 across the back. So the left back is a 5. So somebody got all bent out of shape, but this is how we do it in the US. And I think this is pretty consistent, certainly with the English professional football too, or football. So bear with me here for a second as I go through, but this is the idea that you as a club director, board, curriculum, you determine that you want to play as a club, the 1-4-3-3 formation is what best fits your development ideas, your philosophy. So it could be any formation that your club wants, but what we're going to try to do is give a rationale for why you choose that formation, so you can sell that to your parents, you can sell it to your coaches, and then we're going to talk about how we could develop that into the club over the period of time that the players are with you. So again, hypothetically, but a potential value of the 4-3-3, the 3 attacking players supporting the 9, and then because of the integrity of the 6, the ability for your fullbacks to bomb forward. That could be a reason. Because you have good depth in the midfield, but you have wide dispersal up front, and you have the length of the 9, you have multiple attacking options. You've got good field coverage from an offensive point of view. The width, having 2 players designated in each wide flank, gives you opportunities of long and short distribution and gives you the opportunity of wide combination, which may not be as apparent if you played, let's say, a 3-5-2. So just, an example perhaps there. I think this is probably really important to all of us in the modern game. Depth within the lines, so you don't play with 3 flat lines anymore. Even though we've listed 4-3-3, there is depth within the midfield, there is depth within the offensive line. I think this is sort of standard content that we should be putting in any formation. The integrity of the centre backs, the lines of recovery, if we're going to get compact, it's quite easy, I think, for a 4-3-3 to go from very compact to very expansive, depending on transitional moments. And then if we've got integrity with our fullbacks, our 2 centre backs who are as ugly and slow as I used to be as a centre back, don't have to come outside the width of the penalty box. That could be a good thing. So to the point, as a club, over time, you identify formations you like, but then you justify them with the strengths and the potential weaknesses that you've got to counter for that particular formation. So that's where you want to be with your U18 boys and girls playing in your provincial cup competitions. But you've also got 5-year-olds in your club. So this is where we now get into some holistic club development. So in the US, we would have to play 4v4 with the 5s and 6s. And so my suggestion is that you try very humbly to get all your coaches playing in kind of a diamond in the 4v4. I think we can all relate that when you put 8 kids that age on the field, it's really 1 versus 7 and it's just a mass hive. But at least you give the coaches some structure. So I went with the idea that you've got a deeper kind of 6, a higher 9, and the 8 and the 10, instead of a 5. So we're trying to, at this early stage, we don't really talk about defenders. Everybody's back and forth. So everybody's kind of like a quasi midfielder and everybody has offensive or attacking potential. And then on the left, for my coaches who are coaching my 5s and 6s, 7s and 8s, these are the 5, what we consider principles of attacking within the US soccer vocabulary, certainly the vocabulary we use with my organization. So first person on the ball is looking to penetrate or hurt the opponent. The next people are looking to support or help. Creativity is creativity. And then the rest of us are trying to make the field big and we're trying to disperse. So there are my 5 principles for attacking. And I'm asking my coaches to, at a very low level of sophistication, but to have those beginning to become important to the kids at the entry level in my program. I then go to the same concepts or the parallel concepts on the defensive side. So pressure, get to the ball, cover, helping the person with the ball, so creating 2v1s. And then everybody else is trying to balance off the threat of the opponent, the ball, the space, and we're trying to make the field small. Incredibly low level of sophistication, but I'm giving my coaches the skeleton to hang some meat on at the entry level to my program. And of course, if you're a director of coaching, if you're working in clubs, the coaches at this level or the next level very often say, well, what do I do with extra kids? What formation should I have? So we're going to help them with that because we're going to have to go to 7-a-side. Oh, I'm sorry, just going to quickly go through this one. So we get some triangles. We try to get 8 and 10 staggered. Probably not going to happen too much, but it's an idea. 6 and 9 are our length and depth. The number 9, that's going to be the glamour position. So we'd obviously rotate the players through the diamond shape. And I'd probably talk to 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds about diamonds and squares and circles. Obviously, it should be up and back and forth, so there's no real attackers and defenders per se. And it's all in, all out. So there's my 4v4. So now the coach gets the problem, or the next coach. What do I do with 7? Well, obviously 1 is taken care of with the goalkeeper. I retain the diamond of 6, 8, and 9, which I had in the 4v4, and then I put in the 2 defenders because now I'm under 9 or 9 and under, 10 and under, and we've got a goalkeeper, so we have role specific. So now we have defender role specific. Remembering, again, always thinking about the 4-3-3 my club wants me to get the kids to. I've got exactly the same 5 principles of attacking on the left, but I've now added in sophistication of how you would get that across to the player, partly for the coach, but then it's up to the coach to stick to these principles and make sure that developmentally appropriately, he or she is passing them along to my players. And then, of course, no different. The defending lines up with the attacking. Transition can be connected in here. You could even come up with a 3rd slide for transition if you wanted to. But the same 5 principles: pressure, cover, balance, compactness, patience, but with greater degrees of sophistication. because I've got physically more able children, I've got cognitively more able children, I've got socially more adaptable children, potentially can deal with adversity, can deal with success and collaboration. And of course, I've got more kids on the field, right? We just simply got more kids. So my 77, and then why did I do this? Why did I come up with this particular shape? Building in the additional lines, introducing the defensive compactness of my 4, 5, and 6. Now starting to really role define with my 3 midfield that were previously part of my 4v4. In the same way that 4, 5, and 6 have to start to have a relationship, my goalkeeper starts to have a relationship with his or her defenders. And I do think under 9, under 10, whilst we won't lock them into a position, they're going to start finding some positions or some skill sets they prefer to play in. Some will be more creative, some will want to score, some will want to be more dogged and defend. So I don't think it's inappropriate to start building relationships. 8 and 10 can be that support, the direct support to 9, because that's what they're going to be when we get to 4-3-3 potentially. And then we do have, again, central compactness, the ability to recover and go forward together. So the rationale. And of course, the next part, I'm getting close to the end of my presentation and turn it over, is, okay, now I've got 9 players. What the hell do I do? So let's have a look what 9v9 could look. So what I did here was I had to add 2. And I added, you can see on the screen, I added the 2 and the 3. Now this is personal. And this is how I would, if I was making this presentation to my club coaches, why I would say this. I think, just an opinion, it's easier to say to a 2 and a 3, you can run forward, than to say to a 7 and 11, you've got to recover. So I've only got 2 players now to add to my 7v7. I'm going to add them in the wide space, and I've just chosen to make them the 2 and the 3. You can make them the 7 and 11, you know, and you can do whatever you want to, obviously. But now, again, across to the left, all of those, or those 5 key attacking principles, they're immutable. They don't change. You know, it's the same as the Brazilian men's national team, the US women's national team, the Pickering under 8s and under 10s. This is defending principles. You might have a different language, but basically the guy with the ball's got to hurt your team, the opponent. Somebody's got to support them. Everybody else is trying to make the field bigger. That's what attacking is. There's not many other ways to say it basically, right? But now we've added in the degree of sophistication. So our coaches, they don't have to be better coaches than the coaches coaching 4v4 or 7v7, not at all. There's going to be expert coaches at every level within your program. They've just got different content they've got to deal with different ages of players. So I would say it's actually potentially more challenging to take less sophisticated content and keep it consistent and keep it fresh and exciting for the little guys than it would be maybe coaching the 11s and 12s. So, you know, horses for courses. I don't need to do it again, right? Defending, 5 principles, greater sophistication, because we're playing 9v9. And then, interestingly, remembering I want to get to 4-3-3, I've now got a 5. What the hell, Ian? That doesn't make any sense at all. But the way I would explain this to my coaches in my club is the 2 could be in the back line or the top line. It just reflects those 2, the 2 and the 3 have got to play basically through all 3 lines. So it could be a 1, 2, 3, 1 with a parentheses for the 2 wing backs or wingers or fullbacks, whatever you want to call them. Again, 6 bullet points. You could have 100 bullet points. They could all be different. There's no argument here. It's just giving my coaches some meat on the bones. So we've added the width. That's critical, obviously. We've maintained this defensive block of the goalkeeper, the 2 centre backs, the 6, and that hasn't changed. That's remained consistent from the 7v7 program. We've got some considerations now because in this particular setup, we've got greater depth centrally than we do wide. So very often in the unsophisticated sort of coach's book, you always use the sideline as your friend, you force them out of bounds. the suggestion here is maybe that we work to always try to force play inside, to not expose our 2 and our 3, and just turn the opponent into the middle. So just a potential defensive approach, part of our systematic approach to using the 4-3-3 formation. So again, how it becomes a system. Building from the back, this is very modern, obviously very sexy if you're Manchester City and you've got the players that can do it. It's not so good if you're Arsenal and you don't have the players that can't do it, but that's another argument. So do your 4 and your 5 disperse to help you build out the back, which I think would be the model development, youth development model. And so therefore your 2 and your 3 can push higher, or you're a little bit more conservative and you build with 2 and 3. So now your 4 and your 5 are kind of just waiting to defend, right? You know, typically we'd like to see the 4 and the 5 go out. Maybe the 6 becomes the central player and the 2 and the 3 can get higher. And then you can play like Man City in 15 years from now. Oh, and a couple of $1 billion will help you too. Where does the support come from the striker? Because we've got good defensive integrity, and because we've told them they're 2s and 3s, they'll recover. So you can go forward and attack, go join the number 9, go join the 10 and the 8. Remember, you got to recover. I think it's a sellable point. If I tell them they're forwards, they won't come back. And you can tell my mentality as a player was defensive, so I got no time for pretty boy forwards. And then a very simple strategy or philosophy for me is that if we're attacking, my centre back's toes have to be on the halfway line, and if we're defending, my centre forward's heels have to be on the top of the centre circle in the other team's half. So we're always staying connected as a team. So as I go through this with my coaches, I'm always showing ways that we can remain physically connected offensively and defensively based on our shape and based on our understanding of that shape in terms of, again, of a system. And so then at the end of my presentation to my coaches, and obviously this is something that we're going to be doing every 6 weeks within the club and reviewing at mid-season and then refreshing in the off-season, but I'm going to review with them and remind them of where they are, what their job is within my club, what their responsibilities, be they at the 4v4, the 7, the 9, the 11, because this is what I want my U16s, U18s doing in the Provincial Cup. These are some of the strengths. This is going to be some of the features. This is what's going to make us, and I apologize, Pickering's just the one club I work with a lot. So this is what makes us Pickering different from Windsor, different from Fort Francis and International Falls. So again, not enough to say that we're 1-4-3-3. Why, how, what, when, where, roles, responsibilities of players. How does it fit into our principles of play? And then ultimately, those of you that are concerned that sometimes your club is really a collection of teams that just happen to wear the same color and the same badge, and there is nothing else that connects them, is ultimately trying to get your club on the same page as a youth development, club development, possibly in line with what the CSA wants or what other objectives and initiatives you're doing. You're an affiliate club for Toronto FC, whatever it happens to be. So that's about a 2-hour presentation that we just sort of whistled through there in about 20 minutes for you. And just some thoughts from me, because I'm really interested in the broader discussion of formations and systems, but I'm also really, really critically concerned about clubs being more holistic in their approach to team and individual player and club development. So there you go, Valerio, there's a few thoughts.
That was perfect. Thank you, Ian. I guess when you guys tried to roll this out back in 2015, what was the feedback from coaches, board members, and parents?
Yeah, good question. So just a quick little bit of history for the audience that maybe doesn't know as much about soccer in the US. Much in the same way that your association is not you have the CSA, but then you also have your association. That's how it is here in the US. We have the federation, the governing body, and we're a member of the governing body, but we provide coach education and support services. So it's a similar model. The guideline came directly from US Soccer, and it came almost effective overnight. And it was quite controversial, as you can imagine, when you suddenly start telling people to change, because in different states of the US, people have been doing different game models and different ideas. Some of the controversies, none of them came to me, or if they did, it was by mistake, and I passed them along very happily because I was not responsible. But the goalkeeping community, Tony, Peter Meller, and a lot of the people they've developed, they don't like the 4v4 without goalkeepers, right? So the goalkeeping community, goalkeeper coaches, they were pretty upset. They want goalkeepers in as soon as possible. Some programs had set up 6 and 8 aside, so now they're going to change their field dimensions by new equipment. That's always a challenge. There was a very big controversy because US Soccer, because they developed the MLS academies, had gone with birth year registration, which is fine in an academy, a professional academy setting, because the boys, in the case of it was boys, don't play high school. So suddenly saying all the 2008s together, no problem. But for the rest of soccer in this country, it was mainly around grade of school. So it was more of a sort of a split birth year kind of thing. So it was very devastating for our grassroots programs, because previously your 7-year-old went to soccer training with a 7-year-old from his class, and you carpooled and they went to school together and they played together. Now they started to break up age groups, and it was very, very, very problematic for a few years. And a lot of clubs lost a lot of players because sports like lacrosse said, no, you can be any age group you want with lacrosse. And the parents like that. So it hurt us for a while. So there's some challenges when you make a national mandate like that and impose it.
What's the thought process behind the no goalies at 4v4?
There is one philosophical position that the little guys need to see the ball hit the back of the net, and there needs to be lots and lots of success. So the size of goals at that age group, there's not really a mandate. And the idea is there's just goals flying in everywhere. There's also there's a child development argument from people far more qualified than me that it can be quite an exposed position, so it's quite stressful, and there's a lot of negative around it. There are other people, of course, and this would be Tony and Peter and the goalkeeping staff, not just because they're selling more DVDs and books, but because they believe in it. Physical literacy would suggest that kids like to tumble and roll and jump and dive. And also, in North American sports, we're very hand-eye coordinated. So it's a back and forth. Personally, if I was running a development program within my club that didn't have to compete against other clubs, I might bring the goalkeepers in a little bit earlier. I might do that now. I might go with bigger goal formats, because if there are young people that like putting on the gloves and the green jersey, I'm showing my age there, but the different colored jersey, I'm kind of leaning towards introducing the goalies as an option a bit sooner. That's my current leaning.
We have a question from the crowd. Ian, what's the reason behind picking a specific formation like 4-3-3 for player development?
Well, most federations, I think they probably, to my experience, the Dutch have always been the strongest in this space. And I think some of the influences we have here in the US are quite Dutch inspired. There's a lot of people that believe that 4-3-3 ultimately gives you good field coverage, and it puts players in relative islands of responsibility. So it's a little bit easier to explain to a player in the 4-3-3, whether you organize the midfield as a 2 and 1 or a 1 and a 2, the direct role and responsibility, and perhaps the physical demands are a little less. sometimes in a 4-3-3. So I don't know. I mean, you know, obviously very English myself, and obviously the cultures that you guys have had influencing football in Canada, 4-4-2 always seemed to be just fine. But 4-3-3 is very much the fashion. What I would say is this, and I think some of your more experienced guests would probably appreciate this. I think in the modern game really now, we're really talking about, do you play with 3 designated backs or 4? I think that is really the key. After that, what happens to the 6 or 7 in front of them is somewhat variable and wonderful. The reason I like 4-4-2 as a potential development model is you have the ability to say to one of the 2 forwards to drop a little deeper and then allow the 2 wide midfielders to push higher. So I quite like the symmetry of 4-4-2 because it allows you to maybe go to 4-1, 4-1. It maybe allows you to go to 4-2, 3-1. So I think 4-4-2 is actually probably the base model for most formations, most fundamental formations. But US soccer has really adopted 4-3-3 as its primary development model for young players. And I think there's a lot of that inspiration came from the Dutch and Ajax.
When we talk about the different formations you have, so 4v4, then 7v7, then 9v9, in the coaching education part, is there specific courses for the coaches to take to be able to deliver what US soccer is looking for from the coaches?
Sure. So US soccer has what they call the grassroots courses. They have an online version of all 4 playing formats. I think they're about $25. They also have an in-person version, which is about 4 hours. So you can understand each formation or each age group category. We also have the same. If you go to our website, we have 3 online courses. They're $20. They come with some video and they come with some other things, and you get a diploma at the end. 4v4, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11. We do talk about the basic formation, the basic game setup, but we talk more about what is developmentally appropriate for a kid who is 8 and under, 10 and under, 11 under. So we talk more about physical development, cognitive development, socio-emotional development. And then we talk more about the type of training games that you would be using, small-sided games, small numbers, more technical training, morphing to more tactical training. We're not really breaking down the game models in great detail because either we get coaches come to our courses who they just want to talk about 11v11. So when they want to talk about the specific game model, as much as they have questions about what it looks like on a Saturday, what they actually really want is how to survive the training sessions when you've got, 10 screaming 8-year-olds, or you've got a group of petulant 15-year-old boys or girls,
And in terms of player-centered, what's U.S. soccer's feeling on allowing the player to play up a year or down a year?
I won't speak directly for US soccer. What I can Raul from San Martin, we've got to get into his question. Raul put something in the chat box, so we need to get to that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So player-centric. Oh, yeah. So I live in Kansas City, and I'm lucky enough to be able to go down and observe Sporting and Sporting's Academy, and they do a great job of moving players around. And the other MLS clubs they compete with have this spirit. If they have a boy that's a little bit physically behind, they'll drop them down for a game or a training, and then they'll move particular talent up, and they'll kind of jiggle it. I think it's very enlightened and informed. Of course, at lower levels, it becomes really problematic if you've got a 15-year-old playing with a 13-year-old. Parents get upset. There's potential physical mismatches and all kinds of tough stuff. But I can tell you in the US at the professional level, the intelligent movement of players around the age groups is used. what I would say is the primary reason that it's done, the first thing that it's done for, right, is because of more often not the physical ability of the kid, where they're physically developed, their ability to cover ground and compete. But I think we can all probably appreciate if you take a 15-year-old and put him or her down with the 13s, there's some social issues, there's some challenges, and certainly in the amateur club environment. And if you take a 13-year-old and you put him or her up with the 15s, now you displace a 15. Do the 15-year-olds even want the 13-year-old, even if they're really talented? So not just because of parent involvement, but also in the best interest of the children. When you're moving them around, I think you need to be monitoring it on a pretty regular basis.
So Raul's comment is biggest reason for not having goalkeepers at early ages is that you do not want kids specialized as goalkeepers.
Yeah.
And they never gain foot skills, which are so essential to the modern goalkeeping. So how do you?
That's a great comment, Raul, and I 100% agree in principle. When I came to the country, to the US in '87, so showing my age, and I wear my hair like this on purpose. I could grow it out, but I wear it like this. It used to be, respectfully, the fat kid got put in goal, right? The least athletic got given a pair of gloves, and they probably just covered a bit more of the goal, and it was really, really sad. But you also got a kid a role and a task, and many of the kids like it. But 100% agree. I would say specialization for me would come in at about 11 or 12 years old, and even then, you're still trying to play the right back out at the left wing occasionally to get a feel for it. So if I'm coaching the 11 and 12s, or maybe the 9s and 10s, I have a pair of goalkeeper gloves in my coach's equipment bag. I have a jersey, and every game, a kid can volunteer to be the goalie if they want to. By the time they're 9, 10, 11, and 12, I'm not making them be the goalie. I'm letting them rotate through. But yeah, when does specialization occur? And if, God forbid, you get a 9-year-old who is the specialist goalie, you've really limited their potential future. What's interesting is what the data shows us is that at the top end of the game now, a player like Edison for Man City or Alisson for Liverpool, they're touching the ball about 80% of the time with their feet. So the modern game, the future of the game in world soccer, and certainly in North America, is that our goalkeepers have to be two-footed and be as adept with the ball, if not more adept with the ball, than the center backs and probably the midfielders, and in some cases the tricky wingers. So if you interpret the goalkeeper position as an extension of the field, then you don't have that problem. But Raul is absolutely right. If you just tell them your job is to pump the ball and catch it, you're limiting the young person's opportunity.
We have a question. Do you follow different formations with the ball and without the ball? So does a 4-3-3 become a 4-2-3-1, and without the ball, become a 4-2-3-1 without the ball, or a 4-1-4-1?
Yeah, it's a good question. Absolutely, right. So if I think of a 4-3-3, when we've got the ball, I would argue that depending on how we play the system, my two fullbacks are more attacking players than my defensive midfielder, or maybe my two defensive midfielders. So if we've got the ball, my two centre backs stay at home, my midfield, some of them stay at home, and then I can push my fullbacks on and be very aggressive. When I'm defending, however, I absolutely want my fullbacks back in position. So that 4-3-3 could become almost a 2-1, 5-1. But you get where I'm going, right? So a 4-4-2 in possession morphs very, very nicely if you're out of possession into a 4-1 and a 4-1. So you just drop a striker deeper, and then you drop a midfield deeper, and you've got now extra lines of defense. That's quite a common, a good reference point if you watch Saturday morning soccer. Burnley in the English Premiership, they do that very well. They'll kind of change their shape. But to the person that asked the question, absolutely. And then you start thinking about transition. So how quickly can I transition from this shape to this shape based on the turnover of the ball?
We have another question, Ian. If we train players in a certain system, for example, a 4-3-3, from a young age and follow it throughout their development, will it not impact their tactical understanding of the game and adaptability factors according to the opposition at a higher level?
Yeah.
Aren't we restraining their tactical understanding if we're just focusing the whole club to focus on one system?
I want to get to the person that has the question about recreational U17 girls too. So we need to get
No problem.
So I think it's a really good question. You could argue that we're a fairly small club. We have limited resources. So we're going to really empower our coaches to make the best sense of what they've got, right? So even in the program I'm suggesting, if one age group ended up with two unbelievably talented left-footed wide players, right? Maybe that particular team is going to play a bit asymmetrical. So you've got one on the left, one on the right, but the one on the right has to cut in to get onto their dominant foot. So there could be some special circumstances, and it could be, you just got some uniquely talented or deficiencies in the player pool. That could be a good reason to tweak it. What I'm trying to get away from, though, is every coach is an expert. So he or she very often, and no disrespect, but a parent coach who's really, again, they're not connected to anything that came before or after. That's what I'm trying to get to in some point. In terms of player getting locked into skill sets, if any of you have ever coached college or provincial soccer or ODP or whatever, there's nothing more terrible than when you say to the player, I need you to go and give me a stint at right back today, and they say, oh, I don't play right back. Yeah. So in the 4v4 model, in the 7v7 model, tons of rotation of positions, understanding roles and responsibilities, starting to get more specialized in the 9v9, and then by 11v11, really becoming a defensive mindset, an attacking mindset, a midfield transition back and forth mindset, and developing that. Now, part of it, though, too, is if you've got a player that really is, by the age of 13, at number 6, they're going to be a defensive holding midfielder because they've got all of the qualities at 13. They have to know how those qualities interface with the centre back. They have to know how those qualities interface with the attacking midfielders and the strikers. So at an elite level, which is perhaps not fair, Jurgen Klopp has taken central midfielders and played them at centre back because he felt they were better than his backup centre backs. We can all argue about whether Liverpool was right and wrong in doing that, but there's some flexibility. The US men's national team, a lot of those players do not play in the same roles they play for their professional clubs in Europe because of, or the MLS, because of the relative strength of their club side as opposed to the relative strength of their national side. So I don't think it's terrible. I think it becomes a real challenge when we as coaches use the vocabulary which has the word never or always. You're always the left back. You never pass the ball inside. You never pass the ball back across your goalkeeper. Once we as coaches start using that vocabulary, I believe that is more dangerous than player development than some of the things we might do, technically, tactically on the field.
So we have one of our members looking for a simple system. They have a recreational U17 girls team. They generally play a 4-3-3, and he doesn't know where to start.
Okay. I would suggest to your colleague. So I think 4-4-2 is so beautifully symmetrical, that you can lay it out so that just the triangle in the midfield in a 4-3-3, unless you play them flat, can be problematic, right? The gap between your wide fullbacks and your wide strikers can be problematic. There are some really nice things you can do with the front three because you can press as a unit, and also you don't have to worry about them really forming relationships and bonds. But I would probably, to our friend who's got the U17 girls, because I think that was the question, recreational team, I would personally, if I came in tomorrow and you gave them to me for 2 weeks and said, fix it, I'd go 4-4-2. And then I would start very small. And I would say to my right fullback and my right midfielder, what is your relationship? I would say to my two strikers, what is your relationship? How do you connect? What are the, and so basically, with no disrespect to U17 recreational girls, but go back to the fundamentals where we're a little bit beyond the level where it's just me and the ball, but I've got to have that relationship with my immediate teammate. And my immediate teammate sometimes is horizontal, the two centre backs, or the right centre back and the right back. And sometimes it's vertical, the right winger, the right back and the right half. So that's what I would probably do.
We have a couple questions. Do you always go with a high press, high block, or do you encourage players to learn their roles and responsibilities in a mid block or low block?
Yeah. So I'm quite big on sort of a division of the field. So some of your participants here or your guests will probably be familiar with this. If you've ever heard the term zone 14, it refers to an area just on the top of the box of the goal that you're attacking. So if you've got players in zone 14, they're basically standing on the top of the opponent's box. That was something that FIFA came up with, where they divided the field into 18 chunks. So bottom left is 1, center bottom is 2, and 3, and so on, right? I like to think of the field in maybe 3 vertical channels, and I like to think of the field in 3 horizontal channels, back, middle, third, or top, or sometimes 4. So I'm starting to now think about different areas of the field. So for example, if you divided the field in 4 across the horizontal, you could say to the players, I want you to press to the top of the third grid, right? So that's quite high pressing. That's where I want you to stand so they can't play out the back. If you were maybe winning, if maybe you were very tired, if maybe you thought the opponent could play out, you would say to them, okay, I want you to drop back to the top of the center circle in their half. So now they've got more space to play out, but we're deeper and more compact. If they always play out to the right side, I might say to my right, so it's gone out towards my left players, I might say to my right-sided players, you have to come across the field and be level with the goalpost, the goalpost on that side of the field. So we're starting to compress to the side. So I'm quite big on using visuals and areas. And sometimes, and I think some of us have probably done it, you put a couple of cones down on the sideline or maybe a water bottle, and that's a reference point for the kids. For the next 10 minutes, I don't want you pushing any further than this. So whether we press high, whether we defend in low blocks, whether we force to the left or the right, or we bring them to the center, there's a million situations for that, right? Could be the opponent, could be the strengths of us, it could be the weather, it could be the score, it could be the level of fatigue based on the tournament or non-tournament. But I think the bigger issue is, because you've read a couple of books and you've watched a lot of EPL, don't yell at the kids to do something in the game that you haven't practiced in training. So, you know, when you start off, you really have one basic game model and you establish it in the preseason. And then hopefully at some point in the season, you can say, all right, we're quite good at doing this. We're quite good at pressing high. and forcing them to the left. Now let's see if we can drop lower, or let's see if we can press high but force them to the center. So again, our responsibility as coaches is really a lot more towards what we do in the training environment in preparation. It's far less what we do in the game, because hopefully we've prepared them to adjust in the game.
Ian, we have another question from Tony, our technical director. He loves listening to you, and he's always enjoys your presentation. He believes that the clearly defined player roles and responsibilities and knowing your role both offensively and defensively within a system is important. And this is something that should be taught by coaches / educators of the game. But he says that there's some coaches that said, just let them play, don't waste your time trying to teach them this. They wouldn't understand what they're saying, what they mean anyways. What are your thoughts on that?
Interesting question. We all of us, the more we can do to encourage kids to go and play without us there, the better. That would be the number one fix or improvement to Canadian soccer, American soccer, English soccer, in my opinion, is more children can take the ball in the backyard or somewhere safe with 2-3 friends and play. In the environments that we're in, of course, we add structure and coaching. And I think we as coaches, less is best, but with intentionality. So probably when we were young, we've all yelled too much. We've tried to manipulate and handle everything. And what we need to do a little bit more as coaches is step back. So for example, with a 12-year-old playing right fullback for me against one of Tony's club sides, I would say your number one job is to stop the left-sided forward for them scoring. The number two job is to help our right winger if he or she's got the ball. And your number three job is, if you've got possession, try to get it to a central midfielder. So give them one task, two tasks, three tasks that you hope they can do. So you don't give them impossible tasks. You give them limited little challenges, and then you evaluate if they did them, right? So it's quite bite-sized coaching. And then you have to do things like checks for understanding. So if I ask you a question and your only answer is yes or no, I don't elicit much information back about your understanding of what I've told you. So I like to do things like this. I might say to the player, show me what a good pass looks like, right? This might be in training. What does helping Valerio in this situation mean to you? Because I might say, I need you to support Valerio and overlap and then make an inside run to an outswung cross. And the kid might not know what any of those words mean, right? Not can't do them. They don't even know what I'm talking about. So we as coaches, and this is, I've used the term a couple of times in the call, and it's something I learned in a course here in the US called the National Youth License, which we now have with my organization. We call it the National Youth Diploma. We talk about developmentally appropriate. And I'll give you a real quick idea. A 6-year-old cannot point their toe and lock their ankle to make an instep drive. It's just not physically what they can do. So maybe dribbling and toe poking is developmentally appropriate for a 6-year-old. You've told a 6-year-old the purpose of the game is to score in the goal, so they all try and do it, which is great. So when you say spread out, go away from the ball, that doesn't make a lot of sense to a 6 or 8-year-old, right? Or a 5 or 6-year-old. By the same token, when we're 12 or 13 and we're just going into the 11v11 format, the biggest problem I've got is, what is my relationship to my immediate teammates? It's not about high blocks, low blocks, 4-3-2-1s that become 4-5-1s. So I just think we owe it to our children to be much more balanced and calm and deliberate, and less is best with our information sharing. But I do not believe that when you're in an organized training with the coach, you just throw the ball out and then sit in your deck chair. I don't believe in that, because the kids in that structured environment, the kids are looking for your insight. Now, you may intentionally set them up and give them 10 minutes of free play, but you know why you're doing it and you know what learning outcome you want from it. It's not enough to just simply sit in your deck chair and saying, I'm doing player centric, because that's not player centric. That's not player centric at all. My opinion.
Any final thoughts, Ian? Any final thoughts to all our listeners out there today?
Yeah, my final thoughts would be, and this is meant with great sincerity. So if at any point I felt like I was talking at you, I apologize, because that would not be my intention. And I believe this strongly, that I'm presenting today because I'm very old and I've been around a long time. But all of you are experts in your environment, because nobody knows the surfaces you have, the resources you get from your club, the kids that you get, what their school lives are like, their family lives are like. So don't always feel confident that you are an expert in your environment. And then what you do, if you're listening to Valerio, or you're listening to John or Tony or myself or whomever, I like that, I'll steal that, I can use that. That sounds good, but it doesn't apply to me, or that really doesn't make any sense to me. There's nothing wrong with that, but please be confident, because if you're doing a sincere job, you actually care about the kids, be it your own children on the team or their friends. You're giving them more than they could ever possibly deserve from you. And then if you can add a little bit of knowledge and insight, fantastic. But at the end of the day, almost all the kids that are represented by all of the participants on this call are not going to be professional soccer players. They're going to be citizens and husbands and wives and partners and so on and so forth. And our job is to put smiles on their faces at the same time as making them feel like they're getting better in the sport, whether they're the U17 rec players or they're the U12 academy.
Thank you very much, Ian. It was a wonderful presentation and discussion. For those of you that want to see this again, you can visit our website at www.nscac.ca. Please, if you'd like to become a member, we also have a partnership with US Soccer where you can get the North American package, so you can become NSCAC member and US membership as well. And for those of you that weren't in the beginning of the call, Ian discussed the upcoming coaching convention. It looks like at this time it's going ahead in January in Kansas City. Correct, Ian?
That's correct.
Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week at our next Behind the Bench. Thank you.
Written by a guy whose son was playing in an MLS academy. So the guy was in, and he said that this was back in the development academy situation. He said the development academy player, and the article was the boxer who has never been punched. So in a world where everybody has to play 4-3-3 and everybody has to do X, Y, Z, you come up with a very vanilla product. So if you're in the English Premier League and you've got to play for the 37% of the guys that are English that play in the Premier League, you play for Man City, you play a completely different way than you play for Liverpool, than you do for Chelsea. So locking people in too much to a single development model, I think, can be very counter to development, because you don't think it creates the flexibility that you need sometimes. And where are the best players in the world still coming from? Brazil, where coaching education is probably the weakest, with no disrespect at all. But the players come from adversity and they learn all these things playing in the streets in the favelas. So I think it's okay to have, I mean, the CSA has to have a national model. They would be, and you're great, because your LTAD is still the poster child. Everybody talks about LTAD even today. So you guys have done a great job there. I would be scared if every single club in Canada was playing 4-3-3. I just think you'd make for very boring soccer.
Yeah, that's not my favorite system, but you know, I guess the one thing about systems, you can tell one player in a 4-3-3 to play one way, and there's another coach tells that same player to do something completely different. Both call it 4-3-3, and they're probably completely different systems in a way.
I do. I get asked to do different things, but somebody asked me to do something on sort of the role of strikers or something like that. So what's interesting is in the English league, really the one that strikes me is Fernando Torres. When Fernando Torres went to Liverpool, the lone central striker and the insane amount of work they have to do became a thing. And so a lot of clubs, I mean, I really think of Fernando Torres as a breakthrough player in that area. So I think he's a great emblem. I think of the 94 World Cup, and I think of the relationship between Klinsmann and Rudi Völler. Klinsmann, this young stallion running around, and Rudi Völler, this wise old dog, and how they needed each other. And there's some wonderful images. If you Google them, if you Google Peter Crouch and Jermaine Defoe, they both played for England and Portsmouth and Tottenham Hotspurs at the same time because they were very popular with Harry Redknapp. So Jermaine Defoe, little black guy, about 5'2", the fastest human being alive. Peter Crouch, 6'9", ugliest human being alive. But they needed each other. So you absolutely, you couldn't play, you could, obviously you could play one of them, but the genius was to play the two of them because they were so complementary. So in the example of if I was asked to play 4-3-3, I might say, okay, I'm going to play 4-3-3, but my front three is going to be two in the middle and one on the left, right? Because they have to be together. But if I've got, I think another great example from modern football recently, and most of my influences are Premier League, Jamie Vardy didn't need a strike partner in 2015 when he won the league for Leicester. He didn't need that. He needed wingers to serve the ball, and he needed three midfielders that would win it and put it in channels for him to score.
Yeah.
If they'd asked Jamie Vardy to play in a 4-4-2, it would have been a waste. Right now, Burnley, if they don't play in a 4-4-2, they'll never score because they need two strikers. So, you know, this is what's beautiful about the game, right? We're all experts, but the trick of the game is when you've got exactly the same amount of talented players, John, as I've got, and we go to the field, and which one of us can win that game 1-0? Man City is going to win. The worst one is Paris Saint-Germain, right? They're going to win 8 out of 10 just by showing up.
Right. Yeah.
Now, if you make the breakthrough and win the Champions League, then you give a lot of credit to Pochettino or whomever. So we're all experts until we get put into that even matchup, and then we'll see.
Yeah, exactly. And funny, Jermaine Defoe, didn't he play with Toronto FC?
Yeah. He came to play for Toronto FC. He wasn't very successful, but he came.
No. And unfortunately, like I have season tickets, and every time it was my turn to go to a game, Defoe would be injured or wouldn't play. And I never got a chance to see him play. But we had
I think the more we can get young Canadians and Americans playing in our league, we don't need the imports. Some of the ones that come and really put in a good shift. A couple of years before, I saw Red Bull, and they had Henry Marquez from Mexico and Timmy Cahill from Everton. And Timmy Cahill was a consummate professional. He worked, he did everything. He was just a slightly older version of what he was in Everton. But then Marquez didn't, just walking about, messing about. And I think that's the disservice. And I can't speak for Defoe. I probably saw him a couple of times here. But if they're just coming to finish out their career, but they're not putting forward full effort, then why do you need him? Why wouldn't you play a young Canadian product that one day can maybe play on your national team?
Yeah, no, exactly. Well, we certainly had, when we had Altidore and Javinko up front, and we had the Spanish guy in the middle. I forget his name now.
Vasquez.
Vasquez. That was a wonder. It was beautiful to watch because they all, and Javinko was I think we signed him when he was 27 or something. So he was still had something to prove. And Altidore was a great combination. Of course, we won the MLS Cup.
Javinko looked like he gave full effort every time. He looked
all
like
the time.
A quality player who,
yeah.
I mean, I was up in Montreal and I saw Nesta playing for Montreal, and I love Nesta as a player.
Yeah.
But he should not have been playing in the MLS. It was kind of a disgrace, really.
Was it? Yeah, I didn't follow
And
that.
I don't know the situation and all of the other stuff, but it wasn't just that he was old. It wasn't even trying to play properly. You know, Lampard signed with NYC. I don't think he only ever played a handful of games.
Yeah.
I don't like seeing it. I mean, Zlatan Ibrahimovic was here a couple of years ago, so it's good fun to see him. But the MLS is not where he should be, right? I really would much prefer to see a guy who's on the Canadian under-23s who somebody thinks could, you know, break through. That would be a much more, that's worth paying a ticket to go see, because we shouldn't be, this is not an exhibition league, the MLS. It should be a growing professional league.
Well, but you know, I do think there is something to be said for some of these guys coming over, because I remember when I had, it was a long time ago, I had a U19s, I guess, 18 it was, 19. And I had, you know, one of the top teams in Canada. And so we had played in the finals of the Robbie tournament. I don't know if you heard of that tournament. And Bob Helton, which is our coach of the Toronto Blizzard at the time, he was a color commentator. After the game, he picked up 6 of my players and brought them to the reserve team. They had a nice working relationship with the club. They allowed us to keep the players, and they would train them. And one of those players went to first team after 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
He scored goals at the right time. And so he played with Roberto Bettega, if you remember him, Ace Belenge, who were in there. But the improvement of my own player, who was good for his age group, with the experience of playing with Bettega and some of these older guys, he just shot up even more. So when he came back to our group, you know, he was miles above. He would have been a draft pick, but the league folded. So if some of these guys come and they give their all, the experience that they have, you know,
yeah, it speaks.
Sometimes it
speaks to where they're at and what they're trying to take out of the game. And you're absolutely right, John. There are lots of these ex-pros who've made good money that come here because they love the game and they just want to stay around the game, and then they'll pass that on to the young kids. But then, of course, there are others. I really don't know Jermaine's situation, but there are others coming on I mean, Rooney. I thought Rooney was a fantastic professional at DC United. I mean,
I thought so too. Yeah.
And he's not, you know, he's not a rocket scientist. He's not the greatest citizen in the world. But if you were a young pro at DC United, the benefits of being around Rooney for that year and a half would have been amazing.
Yeah. I think there's still a bit of room for that, a veteran coming.
So Valerio, you're in Toronto as well?
Yeah, I'm in Toronto. I'm about 30 minutes from John.
Okay. All right. And you said it snowed. We've got lovely 50, 60, 70 degree weather here, 60, 70 degree weather for a couple of weeks coming up. And then on Tuesday here, it snowed, and they said it came from you guys. So
we heard the snow came from you guys over here. That's what they're saying.
I think it blows south. Nice to see you guys. Anytime I can help, all right?
Okay,
thank you very much, Ian.
Bye, fellas. Bye-bye.
Take care, John.
Yeah. See you, Valerio.
Take care.